Hello everyone. After posting my last making a card video, I wanted to do some more experimenting with my Inktense pencils and the Dove blender pen. So this time I wanted to try a different type of paper for it. So I'm using the Tim Holtz Distress watercolor cardstock, which is kind of my go-to watercolor paper. And I have it smooth side facing up. And then I'm using this CC Designs Himalayan Poppy image and inking it up with Hero Arts black dye ink. And don't let the word dye ink confuse you. With this stuff, it is permanent. The only thing it doesn't work for is Copic markers or alcohol-based markers. But it works awesome for watercoloring and sentiments and just a nice crisp black outline. I really love this ink. So inked up my stamp with that and then stamped it onto the smooth side of the Distress watercolor cardstock. And then I'm using this by Design Nesting Tickets dies, lining that up, and then I'm going to tape it into place before I run it through my die cut machine. I always like to die cut before I color or anything, just to make sure I get the die cutting straight and then I don't go to all the work of coloring and then run it through my machine and mess something up, because that's usually my luck. So once I've got it die cut, and you can see the nice little piercing edge it gives as well, which I'm just absolutely obsessed with all the dies on the market now that have, piercing and stitching edges, because I still remember back in the day doing all that by hand, using little templates and a needle and all that stuff. And I love now that I can get that effect with no effort on my part. So anywho, I'm using a couple different colors of Inktense pencils. I'm sorry I didn't write down exactly which colors I used. I was just kind of going by my swatches and what I thought would look best. But I'm using kind of a burnt orange sort of color towards the center of the flower. And then I applied, I think this was carmine pink, towards the outside edge. I was going to experiment blending the colors together. And then my Dove blender pen. And I am really happy with how well this was working. I had no idea if this was even going to work at all, because again, this is a total first time experiment on my part. I wasn't sure how well the Dove blender would work on watercolor cardstock because it absorbs more. But this being a new blender pen, so it was like, or even a freshly refilled one would work just as well. Yeah, it moved the colors so nicely and it blended really well. And then I kept the little outline from the die cutting to use as scrap to kind of scribble the extra color off of the Dove blender pen. I'm not too concerned about it really, but it does help a bit. And then, yeah, once I was happy with that first flower, I went and did the exact same thing to the other two flowers and the little bud there, got the color laid down, and then just took the blender pen and started blending it all together. So for me, I really like this method with the watercolor cardstock more than the heavyweight ultra base that I used on the last card, more so because this absorbs a little bit more, so it wasn't so slick. It blended really nicely, and it's not going to pill as much. I still think there's a chance it could pill because it is a blender pen and not a water brush, so you're using a little bit more pressure and causing a little bit more friction to blend the colors. But this is where having a new Dove blender pen or just a freshly refilled one helps a lot, because the drier the pen is, the more pressure you're going to have to use and the more effort it would take to blend the colors. And also, this doesn't have to be done with Inktense pencils. I get a lot of comments about that too when I use them. A lot of people, because it's like, oh, we can't afford them, or will it work with other types of mediums? You could use just regular watercolor pencils for this. They don't have to be super fancy, super expensive. The only difference with the Inktense is they're just, because they're higher quality, you get more vibrant color, and they are waterproof or like permanent once they are fully dry. So you can get some neat like layering effects, which I still have yet to really master. So yeah, you can use any run-of-the-mill watercolor pencils for this technique. So I just like to use my Inktense because I spent a lot of money on them and I still want to practice and play with them. But yeah, use what you've got. That's the whole kind of beauty of coloring and fiddling and all this kind of stuff, is you can get so many cool techniques and effects and all kinds of stuff. There's so many mediums out there, and I've said it a million times, I own lots of them. I just don't have enough hours in the day to experiment and play. And if I could just sit and color all day, every day, I would. But yeah, I got kids and a whole household to take care of and all that kind of stuff. So few and far between. So anywho, once I kind of layered and blended the colors to my satisfaction and was really happy with how this all went. I'm gonna have to try this again, different images and all that, but I'm really happy with this Distress watercolor cardstock and the Hero Arts black ink, and then using the Inktense pencils with the Dove blender pen. So really love how that all went down. So once that was done, I grabbed my Posca white paint pen and just added in some highlights here and there. Mostly because I'm too lazy to leave out those areas when I'm coloring. I'd rather just color and then add the highlights in later. It's just easier. So then I grabbed the pattern paper I was planning on using, and this is from the Basic Gray Vivienne pack that I'd shown in a haul a while ago. I can't even, my days are always messed up. I'm horrible with dates lately. But yeah, I had trimmed down a few different pieces of pattern paper, including that dark brown that's in the same pack. And then I just kind of layered them unevenly, which is also something I somewhat struggle with. This just makes my OCD tick. I usually like to, straighten things out, but when you do some uneven layer, it just kind of turns out nice, and then you don't have to worry so much about things being like lined up perfectly. So figured out kind of my layout, and then the sentiment is from my Elegant Greetings set. I was originally going to use the larger greeting and stamp it on a separate piece of cardstock, and adhere it with foam tape or something like that, but then I decided I didn't want to cover up any or as very little of the image as possible. So I grabbed a little mini sentiment from the set, and I decided to make this one into a sympathy card. That's another thing I get a lot of requests for, is to show more sympathy cards, because I know it's something all of us struggle with. Generally, one rule of thumb I have is I like to make sympathy cards in advance, sometimes mass produce a few of them, using, the same image, same color, even just make the same card several times over or make several similar. That way I have them on hand. And back to this card, I wanted to wrap some ribbon around the card and just use my craft knife at first to mark a line. And then I took it off of all that pattern paper and actually cut, using that line as a guide, right through the main image here, just so that I could thread the ribbon through and just that just gave me a little bit more space for the bow. Otherwise, the bow would have been really off to the side and practically, hanging off the edge of the card, which just wouldn't look very nice. So once I got the ribbon wrapped through, I applied my ATG adhesive back to the main image, and I'm going to adhere that to the card. I thought for a second about adding, foam tape to this, but it wasn't necessary. So I just adhered it flat to the card front and then wrapped the ribbon around and tied it in a bow, which I edited out all of my fiddling. I do have a separate video on my channel. It's really old. I think I have it under my quick tips playlist, but yeah, how to tie and knot ribbon on cards. Yeah, and I use the same technique, I guess, as I always had. I always get a lot of comments and questions about that. But yeah, I've tied hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bows. I've been, card making for, oh gosh, over 10 years now. And I have no idea how many cards I've made, but I've tied a lot of bows. Practice makes perfect. So once the bow was tied, I added some Doodlebug Bonbon sprinkles to the card and left that as my embellishment. If I hadn't have gone with a sympathy card, I probably would have added some Wink of Stella shimmer to bling it up a little bit, but I thought I would keep this card a little bit more simple, even though it's kind of a brighter color combo. Yeah, my card base was some heavyweight white cardstock scored at 5.5 inches, so it's 4 1/4 by 5.5, so standard A2 size card. And got the card front adhered to the card base. And then for the inside of the card, I just grabbed the main image stamp again and just my scrap grid paper. And I wanted to ink up the stamp in 2 different colors of ink. So I have some Memento Peanut Brittle and Rosebud ink. And I inked it up with Peanut Brittle, and then I inked it up, just kind of dabbed a little bit of Rosebud ink here and there on it. And I got the scrap paper out because I wanted to see how it looked full strength and then second generation stamping. And once I saw the second generation, I was happy with that. That's what I wanted to use on the inside of the card. just so that it wasn't too dark, so that you got a lot of space to write something. So I inked up the stamp again, peanut brittle first, and then took a little bit of rosebud and just kind of dabbed it here and there, all over the stamp. That's why I like these little, these aren't cat eye, they're teardrop shape. That's what I'm trying to think of. Pregnancy brain. I like these little ink pads for stuff like this because it makes it so easy to kind of, yeah, go in there and dab the colors where I want them. So stamped it off once onto the scrap paper and then stamped it a second time onto the inside of my card. And then the sentiment is from the same Elegant Greetings stamp set, and inked it up with the Hero Arts black ink, and then used my stamp positioner again to make sure I get this stamped straight on the inside of the card. So get it all lined up. I used the kind of center line of my grid mat here. Oh, another question I've been asked a lot lately is, where did this grid mat come from? It's actually the same one I've been using for years. I just flipped it over. This is the Martha Stewart one I picked up. I think I got this one at Walmart years ago. And yeah, the other side is the actual grid lines that you guys saw for a really long time. And then the back side is these crisscross lines that you guys have been seeing. So hopefully, I don't even know if they still sell this mat anymore, but hopefully that answers any questions you guys might have. As always, the info will be below the video in the description box below with links to all the supplies used. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye.